I came back from Ukraine for the 17th time 24 hours ago. So it will be more about the feelings I have. Both on the side of the fighters and on the side of the civilians, the first point for the fighters is something that stands out every time. On one hand, it's their pride in being part of something bigger than themselves. The struggle between good and evil, the technological innovations that everyone is watching, the earth is watching them. They are proud of Zelensky, a true leader who stayed instead of fleeing in 2022, unlike what most presidents might have done. That's something we actually hear very regularly. And he also repeats that what keeps them going is the fact that they know, sure, it's hard. Yes, there are injuries and deaths daily, but it's less severe, with fewer deaths than last year. 2 years, especially late 2023 during major difficulties in November and December, included some much harder periods. Now, when I go 2 7/8 miles from the front and spend nights in the trenches, it's tough. But they say, this is easy compared to what we faced before. So already they have a frame of reference that is, it was worse before, we had more deaths before, we had lots of friends who died, who were wounded and so on. But today still, we're in conditions where we're holding on. Most importantly, it's even worse for the Russians. They're suffering more and have more deaths than we do. Temperatures in the trenches have stayed at -15 to -18 degrees for 15 days now. By the way, since there's no electricity and no heating, the water in the toilets freezes inside the apartments. For people in cities like Kyiv today, for the soldiers, they also get feedback, and it's not just propaganda being sent to them, it's actually operational reports. They also know Russian logistics are worse than theirs, and that more Russians are dying in the trenches, even from the cold. And they receive support daily, they feel it. And every time we go into those trenches, there are drawings from children. There's the electric generator that was paid for by volunteers. There are thermal outfits that are even made by elderly people. I've seen incredible things. We go to a retirement home. There are people who work as volunteers, of course, making camouflage outfits or thermal clothing. Or to assemble the drones, they're braiding the drone's electrical wires. And this support from the population for its army, with hundreds of thousands volunteering in the first hours of the war, that's something that was really fundamental. And in their morale, in their ability to hold on, which is really very, very important. Later, these same soldiers, when we talk to them behind the lines, when they're resting, when they're in the cities. Kramatorsk is less than 20 kilometers from the front, so there's still a lot of tension. For example, the last time I was there in November, I was chased by first-person view kamikaze drones. You know what the Russians do in cities like Kherson? They organize human safaris. Russians have shared over 1,200 videos showing them intentionally targeting civilians, including people simply walking down the street. When you're in Kramatorsk, as soon as there's any sign of life in a house, it's between the Russians and what their kamikaze drones bring. Much more than by artillery, as soon as there's a smoking chimney, as soon as there's a solar panel, as soon as there's a sign of someone tending their garden, maintaining some activity just to eat, they will target that house to make life unbearable. And despite that, when I was there, see, in November, for example, we went with a drone team to the front and we were really less than, well, barely 10-9 miles from the Russians. The roof was blown off and people had put a pumpkin in front of their house because it was Halloween. Looking back, I nearly cried, amazed by people's resilience and willpower. But what do the soldiers do then? The soldiers, when they talk to these people, when they go to the front, when they meet these people, retirees who fill the roads so others can drive faster and so on, there is a real connection and they feel real support from the population that supports them. When they go to gas stations, people give them their points, like their loyalty points. Except over there, it's to feed the soldiers. They go eat for free at the gas stations. So they really have this strong support that they experience every day. And as I was saying, when you're much farther back, when you're in Kyiv, there's a bird flying there. Well, there's a look. You can tell they're always extremely attentive. Now, I'm not a psychologist at all, but you can clearly see there's something going on. The nights, anyway, there isn't really a full night, 2/3 of the nights. There are air raid alerts. The difference is the military, the air raid alerts. In Kyiv, civilians stay in their beds, though some sleep in hallways. Soldiers do the same when they're in the rear resting. There are a lot of parties, so Kyiv is a very festive city, contrary to what you might imagine. It's a bit like what we saw during World War I when Paris was the city of parties. Despite appearances, there's plenty of laughter. A lot of parties are actually organized by the military, simply because they're the ones who are there to unwind for 48 hours. There's also an element that's really important: camaraderie, the support they have for each other, the closeness, the shared suffering, and sharing what they're going through, including with their friends who have been wounded. For some in hospitals, that bond remains extremely strong, and it shows. And for example, there are a lot of French speakers, especially former members of the Foreign Legion. I'm in contact with them through my YouTube channel. We hold fundraisers, including one supporting French-speaking fighters, but these are not for humanitarian purposes. Very clearly, there is a humanitarian fundraiser. We do humanitarian work, and there is a fundraiser. Let's support our French soldiers who had the courage to go fight over there, or French speakers. So we have these people who group together by language, and we end up with, I don't know how many hundreds. I saw South Americans who were speaking Spanish. We're on the train. I have Mexican fighters getting into my train. These people form groups of 20-25 led by someone who acts as a translator. After 2 to 3 years, they begin speaking Ukrainian. But there really is a sense of community. We have the same experience. We did Afghanistan together. We fought against the warriors, the shining path. They all feel a calling, especially those from abroad, that extends beyond Ukraine, like fighting good versus evil and saving civilians. There's that aspect, and honestly, it goes beyond them. But it's better that I die, because that way I prevent other civilians from going through what Ukrainians went through in the occupied areas. You also have many testimonies for that. Cities such as Kherson, which were occupied and later liberated, are known for raids, kidnapped children, and the discovery of mass graves. Even now, people in Izium know that every Ukrainian soldier lost at the front saves civilians behind the lines. That's something we see very regularly. For example, I was in Yampil and they were talking. There were some old people who had stayed there, and the only reason to stay was, who's going to take care of the dogs? Everyone left the village and abandoned their dogs. I'm alone caring for 25 dogs. If I leave, they'll die. And so, surprisingly, and I saw this in Siversk, in Yampil, and in the south, in a village whose name I forgot, Pokrovske, not Pokrovsk, but Pokrovske with an E. 3 times people stayed because they had to take care of the dogs. So that's something that really needs to be considered when it comes to people's willingness and acceptance to evacuate. Caring for dogs is especially important for people moving countries without their dogs' vaccination records. It's an obstacle to accepting evacuation and to people actually evacuating. Also, the 2022 evacuations often occurred under poor conditions. People ended up in unheated tents in winter, while in the end, if they had stayed on the front line, maybe they would have been less cold, or at least suffered less. At the time, I'm going to talk about the civilians a little bit, so it's more difficult. It's the first time during my journey that I felt more suffering among the civilians than among the soldiers. There are always deaths and so on. For the first time, I assure you it's 5 degrees in your house with no electricity. For example, I had no electricity even on Kreschatik, the main street. Maiden Square was 200 meters away, and I had no electricity from 8:30 a.m. to 10 p.m. People know plugging in electric heaters at night will crash the grid. You can't have tea during the day, can't warm up and go to work in a puffer jacket. There's not even enough electricity in the morning for bakers to make bread. The bakers can't make enough bread. So daily life, the nights, with the explosions, the air defense, almost every time we get woken up, there are people who are tired, who are exhausted, but who still hold on with a very clear vision and understanding of the war. Every morning you're in the street, you're in your car, and at 9 a.m. everyone stops and there's a minute of silence. No matter where you are, loudspeakers pause everything automatically, from Maiden Square to the most remote villages. Restaurants, waiters, everyone will stop for a minute, so that makes the reality on the ground visible. Of course, there are the convoys with the dead passing through the city. People kneel down, and you still see that regularly. Last weekend at Maiden Square, a convoy arrived and everyone stopped, knelt, and let it pass. It still happens often. Unfortunately, there's a problem for the children. With no school in Donbass since 2022, they've become very isolated. For example, I'm in contact with school principals because we brought electric generators to these schools. Well, today, even the large official public schools are closed due to lack of heating and electricity, so all classes are online. It's similar to COVID, but this has lasted 3 years. Children who no longer have friends or attend school, though they still take classes, are desocialized, which is a real hardship. Children and young people no longer have normal relationships, facing hard nights and unable to play outside. With schoolyards that are now buried, like for example in Busha and Izium, schoolyards with underground gyms built beneath them. These are things where kids no longer play soccer outside in much of the country, and that's quite difficult, and it's pretty traumatizing. Obviously, monitoring and visibility of the wounded are crucial, as there are many injured people. Ukraine is doing all it can. They increased their medical capacity tenfold, but the need is still greater. Some of the wounded are treated abroad, but in any case, not everything is covered. For example, in Lviv, I spoke with an English-speaking soldier who was wounded and couldn't stand up straight due to leg and back injuries. His first 2 surgeries were funded by the government and army, but not the later ones. He's raising money to finish his uncovered medical treatment since once his life wasn't at risk, coverage stopped. I don't know what the limit was. He lacks the care needed for full recovery. Many areas lack money, inflation is rampant, and the hryvnia jumped to 50 in just 2 weeks. I noticed nearly a 5% change in the local currency, indicating that everything is also rising over time. I'm just trying not to miss anything. I think I'll be a bit shorter than the others. That way it'll help you catch up. Here are the memorials in the city centers. Oh yes, the feeling of injustice that's not visible among the military. But why aren't you helping us? Why aren't you coming? You? Do you have air defense systems? When I first visited, the Russians struck infrastructure near the operational nuclear power plants in Rivne. Why aren't you coming with your... if there's a new Chernobyl, it's going to affect you too. Why aren't you coming? Why aren't you coming? To save us, to protect us? 3,000 attacks on schools. No, 2,400 attacks on the healthcare system. 3,000 attacks on schools. 100,000 civilian buildings targeted. 93% of the attacks against civilians. Why don't you care? Why defend Israel? Why did you go to Sarajevo and why let us die? And there's this Sky Shield operation. Maybe you have a place to talk about it, but over there it made some noise too, where people were saying, well, Western planes that were in Poland could just come intercept the missiles that hit civilians every day, the heating networks and so on. Why don't you do it? And so the lack of understanding about our slowness, that's real suffering for civilians, excuse me. That's real suffering, really. If there's one heartfelt cry that sums it all up, it's why aren't you helping us more? I even had some examples. The gas station attendant said, I'm an artilleryman waiting for the artillery parts you promised. Because today, I'm useless. I'm just a gas station attendant. Well, it's nice to be a gas station attendant, but I want to be useful. I want to go and free my sister, who was raped 7 times in Mariupol. They managed to get news through relatives and so on. They're aware of the situation in the occupied zone, so some people have accepted they'll never reclaim those areas. Some people are just waiting for weapons so they can fight where they're skilled. There you go. That's where it will stop for me. Thank you. Thank you very much.